Hi, Susan Piver here. I'm very happy to be here. I love Facebook Live. It's pretty amazing. So today I thought I would just hop on and make myself available to answer any questions anybody might have about their meditation practice. And, you know, when we talk about questions about meditation, often we're also talking about questions about just being a human being alive, trying to find a way to be kind and wise and genuine. So if you have any questions like along those lines, I would be happy to answer. So just ask me anything. I'm looking over here because I've got Facebook on my big screen over here. So if you have any questions or reflections that you want to share about your meditation practice, just put them in the comments and I will do my best to answer them. And in the meantime, I have compiled a list of the questions that I hear the most often. So I will share some of those with you in case they're your questions too. So the biggest question, the question I hear, my hair always looks so weird to me when I go on Facebook Live. The question I hear the most often, by far, is do I have to stop thinking in order to meditate? Because I can't stop thinking. And the answer to that question is no. You do not have to stop thinking in order to meditate. You might have to comb your hair, however. That would be crazy. And whenever I hear meditation instruction that includes clear the mind of thought, I just get a little upset on your behalf, because your mind exists to make thoughts, and that is good that it does that. I'm going to stop messing with my hair. And if it suddenly, there's no switch where you just could go, oh, turn that off. And often people get very frustrated and think, well, I can't meditate because I can't stop thinking. And so stop thinking that, and then you should be much better. When I teach meditation, I often use this example to demonstrate how ridiculous it is to try to stop thinking. If I ask you to look out through your eyes, which I assume you're doing right now, or if you're visually impaired, to just hear out through your ears. Okay, you got that. Now stop trying to try not to see anything or hear anything. Try really hard. Could you do it? That's how kind of hard it is to stop thinking, and how even if you could do it, so what? You know, perhaps someday thought will just diffuse and dematerialize and quiet and still on its own, which would be a whole different thing. But in the meantime, when we're like, shut up, that is not included in the meditation instruction. So no worries about that. And another question that I hear quite often, I'm going to look at my list over here and also check the Facebook feed to see if there are any questions that you have or reflections. So another question that I don't hear it a lot, but when I hear it, I pay special attention because it's a really important question, is will meditation help me with my anxiety? And is meditation right for everyone? Is it just like, well, everybody should meditate? And the answer to those questions are, no, not everyone should meditate. That is crazy also. I mean, there is no one thing on earth that is right for everyone, aside from breathing. So if you're under treatment for a psychological condition or a mental illness, or you are suffering from extreme anxiety, or are being treated or feel that you have a psychosis, then meditation should be not on your list of things to do. Meditation would be actually not good for you. It can, because it sort of shines a spotlight on the way our mind works and the flow of our thoughts, if that flow itself is already a source of trouble for you, like extreme trouble, then it will only amplify it. So meditation is not for everyone, and it is not for those for whom it is for. It might not be for you all the time. So if you're experiencing an acute emotional situation, it might not be so good to meditate. You know, we think, well, let me just attack my emotions through my meditation practice, and that is, of course, aggressive and unhelpful. So don't feel that you should meditate when you're under extreme emotional duress. If you can do it and it helps you, that's great. But if you sit down to do it and it's like a noose tightening around your neck, make your immediately switch to a different practice, which is a much more difficult practice, actually. And that is the practice of being gentle toward yourself. That is the highest practice. That is the best practice. So on those times when acute emotions prevent you from meditating, even at, you might try it and be like, oh, well, maybe I can do it. Or you may try it and think, immediately begin to practice gentleness toward yourself. I mean, that's a good practice always. So, okay, there's a question here, or comment, I'm not sure, from Julia. Hi, Julia. Meditation is nearly the only time of day that I sit still and have quiet. It's also where I receive some of my most creative ideas. I never stop to write them down, and I think you may have had this conversation with Jonathan Fields. But I lose most of them. I'm not laughing at you. I lose most of them by not capturing them in that moment. How can I manage some of this pure creative energy that flows during these times? Well, I love that question, Julia. Thank you for asking it. It's a question that I, too, have had. And I'm going to give you two answers. One is the right answer, and the other is what I myself do. So the right answer is exactly what you are doing. In your meditation practice, you have some great idea, granted, maybe fantastic. The instruction, nonetheless, is to notice it, call it thinking, let go, and bring your attention back to the breath. The instruction to let go and come back to the breath applies to everything. Like if the Buddha himself sits down in front of you and says, hey, I think you're about to become enlightened, you say, oh, thinking, let go, and return your attention to the breath. That's how one-pointed it is. That is the correct answer, and that is what I encourage you to do. And that's what I encourage myself to do. However, there have been occasions, particularly when I'm working on a book or trying to write something, usually, when some notion comes up. In my daily practice, it's usually okay because I'm not practicing for hours in my daily practice. But in a daily, when you're on, especially if you're practicing for a long time, but you can use this suggestion anytime. But I discovered this faux solution when I was on a long retreat, and I kept having notions about things I wanted to write about, and they wouldn't leave me alone. I kept thinking, coming back. So at one point, I just sort of looked at my thumb, this very thumb, and I said to my thumb, I'm putting my idea in you. And when I stop meditating, I hope you'll be there. And then some other idea came up, and I was like, okay, you got to hold this idea. And maybe I did this one or two more times. But then when I got up off my meditation cushion and looked at my thumb, that idea was there. And this idea was here. So, but the main thing, I think, is that it enabled me to let go of trying to obsessing over that idea. And sometimes I've done it, it's not there. But usually I store it somewhere, and then when I go follow the breadcrumb back, which is looking at my thumb, I can find it. So don't do that. Karen says, I think you have a point. Some meditation does seem to amplify my depression and PTSD. Switching to metta or Tongueline meditation helps. Absolutely. I'm very happy that you mentioned that, Karen, and especially regarding trauma. And then metta, by the way, for people that might not know about it, what it is, that means loving kindness in Pali, Maitri in Sanskrit, or maybe it's reversed. And Tongueline is the practice of sending and taking. These are both practices where you work with the energy of the heart very directly. And it's not as formless. I mean, breath awareness meditation is not formless. It has the breath as the object, but there's a tremendous amount of spaciousness in breath awareness practice, in loving kindness and Tongueline, we actually direct our thoughts as opposed to trying to let go of our thoughts in a loving direction. So that's a great idea, Karen. And I want to say that a rule of thumb, that's hilarious, Julia. I love that. Trauma is its own category. No rules of, I don't think any normal psychological rules apply to trauma. Trauma, I'm making this up, but it's a limbic system situation. And reason and trying to calm yourself down through just being, saying nice things to yourself, it doesn't work. It's like you're a trapped animal, and you're not going to go into a cage with a trapped animal and go, just calm down, you're fine, because the animal's just going to. That's trauma. So trying to meditate your way through that is contraindicated. I kind of don't care what anyone else says. There may be people who have developed strategies and treatment methodologies for trauma that involve meditation. That's awesome. You should ask them. But from my own experience with panic attacks, whenever I've said I don't really have them that much anymore, but there was a period of time about 10 years ago where I was having them a lot around being claustrophobic. And I would tell people about it, and they'd go, but you're a meditation teacher. Can't you just meditate with it? And I was like, no, I effing can't. Because it's like trying to tell a cat or a dog or an animal, just sit there and meditate. It just isn't going to work. So trauma, I just will say again, is its own category, and one should be particularly careful with meditation during trauma. So there you have it. Such a good time for Tongueline for us all. I'm guessing you mean just like life on earth right now. Yes, Krista, it is a good time for Tongueline. Again, the practice of sending and taking, which is a beautiful practice, a very powerful practice, and a very, very difficult practice. If you want to learn more about it, just Google it. So another question that I hear a lot, I'm looking at my list, and feel free again to, if you're just joining, hi. If you have questions or thoughts about your meditation practice, that's why I'm here. Please ask me anything about meditation, which is the same as sort of saying, ask me anything about being a human. I'll do my best. So another question that I hear a lot is, I am too antsy, I am too hyper, I am too ADHD, and maybe you are, maybe you've been diagnosed, but it's also sort of become a catchword for frantic. I can't meditate sitting down, I am too antsy, or I have too much energy, whatever it might be. My meditation is running, or swimming, or gardening. Does that count? It's sort of the inferred end of that question. And my answer as a formally trained meditation teacher is no, it does not count. However, it is great. Things that, like running and swimming and yoga and gardening and cooking and kissing and going for a long drive even, these things are what I would call meditative. They have a meditative quality, but meditation itself is a formal practice that involves a certain very clear technique. And when you're doing that, you're meditating. But when you're doing other things, that's not meditating. Again, it may be meditative. The thing that all of these things have in common, running and yoga and so on, is they synchronize mind and body. Our mind and body want and need to be in the same place. Imagine that you're running and your mind starts thinking about all your emails. Well, you might trip over something. Or you're, in tree pose in yoga, and you start thinking about something, and then you would lose your balance. So these things call our mind and body into the same place, and that is powerful and wonderful. And synchronizing mind and body in Buddhist tradition, and probably other traditions too, is said to be the root of actual true relaxation. So anyway, just for what that's worth. You see any more thoughts and questions? Oh, my Facebook seems to freeze me on very strange poses. Right now I'm going like this on Facebook Live. So again, if you want to ask me anything or say anything about your practice, please put it in comments below. And in the meantime, I have two other questions that I hear a lot that I want to just ask myself and then answer. Let's see, where's the one I'm looking for? One question goes something like this. When I sit down and place my attention on my breath starts to become strange. I start to hyperventilate, or I notice I start to feel short of breath, or my breath starts to feel like weird to me. Sometimes people ask this question about the eyes. In the practice I teach, the eyes are open, and people say, well, I just start to see dots or colors or shapes start to shift and things like that. And so in both cases, I would say that don't worry about any of that. I know it's not comfortable, but when we're meditating, we're trying to narrow our attention down to this one thing, which is our breath. And we're not accustomed to that. So usually, like, I'm not going to go outside the screen, but our attention span is, say our attention capacity is this big, and it is jam-packed all day long and sometimes all night long. There's a billion things going on in there. And when you sit down to meditate, you make it this big and you put one thing in there, your breath. But this is still this big, even though now you've taken out all of this stuff and you put one thing in this big space, which is your breath. Well, your mind just starts to go, what? And you can become self-conscious of your breath, because that's what you have to focus on, or your eyes, because that is also something that's going on when you're sitting. So it's very normal to become hyper-conscious of certain things, especially in the first minutes of meditation or the first weeks or even months of a meditation practice. So the instruction is to sit for longer. So if you normally sit for 10 minutes and this happens, try sitting for 15 minutes, because this kind of thing tends to just calm down on its own. And it's not a big deal, and don't worry about it. And if you start obsessing about it, like, what was that color I just saw? Thinking. You call that thinking, let go, and come back to the breath. So I have one more question that I will share with myself and you, I guess. But I want to see if there are any things in comments here. Not yet. But sometimes they come later, and I just don't see them. So anyway, okay, here's my favorite. Meditation can be very boring. Am I doing something wrong? That's a great question. The answer is no. You are not doing anything wrong. In fact, there are some teachers who say, congratulations, that's a really good sign. Because, you know, we're used to doing many, many things during the course of a day, sometimes many things at once. And when you sit down to meditate, you're saying, I'm just going to do this one thing, which is sit on the earth and breathe. Can't really strip anything away from that and make it any